Friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Em and let's talk about some books. So today I am going to do a weekly wrap-up video. I'm hoping to do these every week to talk about what I've read in the previous week or what I've DNF'd, what I'm currently reading. Mainly because I know if I wait until the end of the month, I will have forgotten so much of this. So, and I'm really wanting to have a lot of book conversations with people. Obviously, I think that's the point of having a booktube account or channel, is to have those bookish conversations. And my memory for books is so poor that I know if I waited until the end of the month, it would just not be as in depth, I think, as I would have liked it to be. So here we are. I did DNF 3 books this week. One of my goals for 2023 is to be a little bit more ruthless in my DNFs. I tend to continue with books longer than I should, just because I have that eternal hope that it will get better and it will turn into a 4 or 5 star read. And I think I just need to be better about recognizing when a book is not going to have that experience for me and letting it go. So I DNF'd 2 books that I already owned, actually 3 books that I already owned. 2 books I had bought last January that I bought when I was sad. I think what I'm learning is my bookish taste when I am buying books for the serotonin hit are not to be trusted, basically. So I DNF'd Dangerous Men and Adventurous Women, which was a book of essays defending romance novels from the 90s. And it just wasn't what I was looking for. There are better works of nonfiction discussing the romance genre. The other one was The Hidden Blade by Sherry Thomas. It's one of her historical romances. And I didn't realize when I purchased it that it's actually a novella prequel for a standalone romance novel. So, and the main characters from the romance novel are children in the novella, and that's just not, no thanks, pass. And then the other book I DNF'd is Wild New World by Dan Flores, which is nonfiction, and it just wasn't what I thought it was going to be, and it wasn't very engaging for me. So I am just going to put it in a little free library, and hopefully it'll find the perfect reader for that book. So those are my DNFs. And then I finished 2 books. Get the pile over here. I finished Graceling by Kristin Cashore, which is for a series read along in Stephanie Bookish's Patreon. And this is YA fantasy, which in 2022 was a hard genre for me. It used to be one of my favorites, but I've really been struggling with it in the past year. But I did like this. I thought teenage Em would have eaten this up with a spoon. And I really wish this series had existed when I was a teenager. And I feel like if you are a fan of the Alana series by Tamora Pierce, that this would be a pretty comparable read. I don't think it's as good as that series, but I think it has a lot of the same vibes. Yeah, and I liked this enough that I'm going to pick up the next book in February. I don't know if I'll finish it. I'm going to pick it up with the understanding that I can DNF it if it is not giving me a lot of joy. But I am glad I read it. You know, there were times, it's third person, and for me it felt like a really pulled back third person. I wish it had been either a closer third person or first person, so I could have gotten to know the main character a little bit better. I don't feel like the reader is in her head as much as I like to be when I'm reading a book. But obviously that's a personal preference. And I also think if you have read this series when you were younger and you loved it, I think it's probably really fun as a nostalgic reread. And I'm kind of jealous of the people in the Patreon who are getting that experience now, because I think that's always fun to read something that you loved when you were in those really formative reading years. And then the other book I read was The World We Make by N.K. Jemisin. This is the sequel to The City We Became, which is one of my favorite books. I reread it in December because I had zero memory of how that book ended. And then I was lucky enough to get this from the library pretty quickly and was able to dive right into it. And I did like it. It's kind of short for a Jemisin book. It's not even 400 pages. And I found myself wishing it was longer, but I did really love getting to be back with these characters. I thought that was really fun, and getting to know some of them even better and just seeing what she did with it. I did read in the author's note that she had to change the plot because the series is fantasy, but it's so rooted in the real world that the real world moves faster than she can write, and the plot that she had planned initially ended up kind of happening in her real existence, and so she had to change it. So there is part of me that really wishes that we had either gotten that original story that she had planned, or that we even got the original trilogy that was planned before it got turned into a duology. But sadly, we do not live in that world. But I'm really glad this book exists and that this world exists. And it's one of my goals this year to finish reading through Jemisin's backlist. I have part of a series still left to read, and then I have a duology left to read. And I'm really excited to have more Jemisin in my life. All right, and then for books that I am currently reading, I am reading 3. I am reading The Way of Kings on my Kobo e-reader. It's my first Brandon Sanderson. It's the second time I've tried to read this book. I started it in January of 2021, and I DNFed it pretty quickly. It just wasn't the right book for me at the time. I haven't read this particular style of high fantasy in a really long time, but I'm enjoying it so far. I'm only 16% of the way through, which, you know, in a regular sized book would be like, I would be done because that's like 400 pages. But for Sanderson, I am not. I have so much more left to go. But I am enjoying it. I am enjoying all the different perspectives. I think the world building is really fantastic. There's so much scope and depth to this world that he's created. I am a little nervous about reading a Sanderson because I have found myself in the corner of Bookstagram that really loves Sanderson, and I am really nervous that he will not be for me. But so far, so good. So fingers crossed we continue along this vein, and that that even if he doesn't become a new favorite author, I hope it is an enjoyable reading experience. Just basically what I'm looking for. I just want to have fun. So as long as I'm having fun, we'll be good. The other book that I'm currently reading is I am rereading Marvellous Light by Freya Maske. I read this initially when I read an early copy before it came out in, I don't even remember, 2021? I loved it. It was 5 stars when I read it the first time. And I'm rereading it because I want to read A Restless Truth, and I'm not sure how much of this book is going to be referenced in the second one. It may be that rereading this is completely unnecessary, but I really love Edwin and Robin. And watching them learn to trust each other is just makes me like the giddiest. I love it. It's so sweet. I really love this Our World, but sprinkle in some magic brand of historical fiction. I think a lot of my favorite books have that in common. So this has been a really fun rereading experience. I've been reading it at night, like when I get into bed, which is a bummer because I get sleepy really quickly, so I'm not able to read as much as I want to, but it's also for me, a really cozy book to pick up as I'm winding down for the day. So this is really great. I don't know if I'll finish it this week or this coming week. I may. But I'm also trying really hard to slow down my reading from last year. So if I don't finish it this week, that's okay. But we're going to keep telling ourselves it's okay. Or what I'm going to keep telling myself. It's okay if I read slower. And then the final book I'm reading that was not on my TBR is The Heretic Royal by J.A. Aiken. And this is book 3 in the Scarred Earth series. Scarred Earth saga. And I always struggle to describe this series because I feel like I do it a disservice. But it starts with the Blacksmith Queen, and it's fantasy romance. Though I would say more like lowercase r romance than capital R romance. I feel like the romance really is a secondary plot to what is going on politically in the book. But basically, it's this family where the oldest sister is a blacksmith and she becomes queen to challenge her psychopath younger sister, who is also trying to be queen but is a really horrible human being and would just like destroy the kingdom. And so her sister counters her and basically goes to war against her. And so there's blacksmiths and there's centaurs and there's war monks and battle nuns and dragons, and it's super bloody because there's this war going on for most of the book. But the violence has this really, it's almost a caricature of violence, so it never feels, it always feels so over the top that I'm never triggered by how vicious it is. I end up laughing a lot of the book. I mean, she's a really, J.A. Aiken is such a funny author, but then I'm probably laughing at things that aren't funny, and we can get into that at another time when we know each other better. We don't have to dissect that right now. I didn't even realize that the next book in this series had come out. She's writing them pretty slow, which is a bummer because I read them fairly quickly. But this has been such a delight. It's the perfect escapist book for me. And I love being back with these ridiculous characters and just seeing all the bananas wackadoo stuff they get up to in this series. So yeah, that's it. That's everything that I have read or am currently reading this first week of 2023. I hope to get these videos out a little bit earlier in the week, ideally like a Saturday or an earlier on Sunday upload. I just had technical difficulties, so it is what it is. But yeah, like if you liked it, and let me know if you have read any of these, if you also were a DNF queen this week, what you're currently reading, really any bookish stuff. I'd love to know, and I'd love to chat about it with you all. So I hope you have a good weekend and are preparing for a good week. I don't know. I'm gonna have to work on my outro. I don't know how to get out of these yet, but I thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.